We're here with Nick Samain, Senior Vice President with DMG Events at the global, I guess it's the energy show nowadays. We were just talking about how far this show goes back in its various iterations over the years. And your involvement with it.
Yeah, Shaun, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to talk to you. And it is important to reminisce, I think, about the Global Energy Show Canada, as we call it today. But goodness, having a history here in the city of Calgary going back more than 55 years. We get asked that question a lot, and as the DMG Events, we see ourselves as a steward of this event, because it is something that's really important here to the history of Calgary. And our mission as a show remains very much what it was when this show first started, and through its different name changes, as we were chatting before the interview, is a way of showcasing a sector that a lot of times really gets it's hard to shine a light to see what's going on in the energy sector, and more so what's going on here in Alberta, and some of the really amazing stories that are happening in the energy sector that have worldwide implications, and what those opportunities look like, what politics look like, and all the different policies and different things that are being talked about here present day over the 3 days of this year's show in 2024.
Well, we were joking that we wound up in the emissions reductions center. Seems pretty ironic for a media outlet that, being full of hot air. So is this a new kind of focus for the show?
Yeah, emissions reduction. We're fortunate, this area, and not lost on me. I just realized that's where we are here. But yeah, our friends and great partners at the Methane Emissions Reduction Alberta here this is the third year that they've hosted this section of the show, and it has been growing. Really balancing, the call and the need for more energy, more Alberta energy, more Canadian energy, and also the technologies that are emerging to reduce emissions, in this particular case here at the theater, from methane.
Right. And we had the Premier talk today, and Environment Minister Schultz, and they were talking about the innovation that Alberta brings to the table and how we're respected around the globe, not just for our energy production, but also for things like emissions reduction.
Well, yeah, I think it's those technologies, and it's great to have the Premier here and Minister Schultz and Minister Jean here today as well. Yeah. Talking about some of those technologies that are homegrown. A good friend of ours and the show here, Kevin Byrne, put it really well that, here in Canada, we've got such a wonderful diversity of sectors, particularly in oil and gas. I mean, look, we've got the oil sands, truck and shovel. We've got traditional oil. We've got unconventional. We've got offshore. We've got all those technologies. What country in the world has that breadth and variety all kind of smashed together? And that's alone in oil and gas is what you see. And those opportunities to I think opportunities to expand our production of energy, and a lot of the conference and what the Premier was talking and alluded to today is what's our responsibility as an energy-rich nation to help export that to different parts of the world that are calling for Canadian energy.
Well, the irony is when I went to my first National Petroleum Show, would have been 1999. The conversation then was around peak oil and running out of oil, and how were we going to maintain, security of supply. And now the conversation has kind of almost switched. Like, now we have all this energy, we have all these reserves. How are we going to get them to the rest of the world?
It's a big challenge, and I mean, we know, as you mentioned, Minister Jean, and we talk a lot about that here in Alberta, being landlocked and issues with the pipelines. Some great meetings happening this year on the topic of energy corridors, not just for oil and gas, but for electricity. There's been There's talks at this year's conference about AI. I was just in a conversation about quantum computing. We all know that there is demand for new technologies, transportation like that are going to require mass amounts of electrification. So where is this energy going to go, whether that's for export from Canada, but also for utilization here in our own country, and looking forward to see how are we creating that capacity and thinking ahead and getting that message out to your average citizen. That's a big, again, back to the beginnings of this show, it's really important to us that the discussions can make their way through to media outlets such as the Western Standard and get down to people that have a vested interest, because we all do have a vested interest in energy because it touches so many things, doesn't it, in our daily lives?
Absolutely. That's what Peter Gulahi used to tell me. He said, we're the owners. We own it. It's ours. We have a responsibility to develop it and to develop it properly. Would you say that the industry's recovered since the pandemic? What's the show in terms of the size and the number of exhibitors and visitors, and maybe some of the deal flow that goes on here?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it a couple ways. So we've certainly, since I'll say those, the pandemic, but even just prior to that, as we look at the big downturn here, that myself 10 years now here in Alberta that we've lived as Albertans following 2014, 2015. Yep. We started to see a bit of recovery through the pandemic. We reopened the show in 2022, and this is our third edition since the pandemic. We've seen growth each year on year in important metrics, number of exhibitors, number of attendees coming each year as well. And then just the deal flow, as you mentioned, new project announcements is something we weren't sure if we were going to be seeing how many of those, both in oil and gas, but also exciting announcements in hydrogen and other petrochemical announcements and others that we've been seeing here in the province. I know, without spilling any beans, because I know that tomorrow and throughout the next couple days of the show, there will be more fresh project announcements to look out for. They're going to be made right here at the show as well. So it's a bit of a rising tide. So the sector, there's more money, more deal flow happening. We try as organizers to structure the show to follow where that deal flow is going, and structure the content and the exhibition around that, and make that a conduit where we can organize that supply chain to do our part. We're 3 days. Our job as a show is to try and supercharge the industry as much as possible, get as much discussion going as possible, and look at it like a day after effect. So come Friday this week, we stop, we get with our executive committee and do an after meeting and say, what has changed, and did we hit some of those goals of drawing attention to what you're talking about is what's next year going to look like, and start planning that already as of this Friday, believe it or not.
Excellent. I do believe you, I know. So you mentioned that you've been in Alberta 10 years from Ontario. Are you a lifelong Albertan now?
So I'll have to answer that by bringing in my wife, who's also from Ontario, that joined me out here in Alberta. And when I first came out here, it really was. I think about that a lot, because it's some of that messaging now is that Alberta is that land of opportunity. And when I first got here, it took a little while to figure that out, being from Ontario, exactly what it means from an opportunity here in this province. And it's not just about jobs or making more money and trying to get things from an individualistic standpoint. What immediately, got my heart here was, you're on the side of the road with a flat tire, people pull over. I'm the worst for it now when I go back to Ontario, and that's not to slag Ontario, but I'll start a conversation in the line at the grocery store because that's just what we do here. Because we've got a real shared fraternity, I think, as Albertans, and we've got an optimistic outlook through a lot of challenges that we've had. And that's got a hold of me. That's got a hold of my wife now, who's moved out here. And I got to tell you, we can't ever see going back there. We are here in Alberta, and we love it. And we're so excited for the future of the province and the opportunities that we're grateful for us and our families. So, yeah, we're here to stay.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
It's a real pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Pleasure too. Yeah. Thanks, Nick.